I'm Rachel Lee, 34, and I worked my way up from entry-level assistant to CEO without ever switching companies. For years, I supported my best friend through breakups, job losses, and rent she couldn't pay. I even introduced her to my boyfriend. But when she showed up to a friend's brunch holding his hand, without warning, without shame, I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought would never turn on you? Someone you would have done anything for? If that hits close to home, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before we get into it, let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life after being blindsided, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, self-respect, and what it means to take your power back. What happened next surprised even me. I was 8 when Kara moved onto our street. She had a loud laugh, 2 missing front teeth, and a way of asking questions like she already knew the answers. By the end of our first day sitting next to each other in Mrs. Clarkson's class, we were friends. Within a week, we were inseparable. We shared Pop-Tarts during recess, made up dance routines in my basement, and slept over at each other's houses nearly every weekend. Her mom let us wear too much makeup. My dad cooked pancakes in the shape of animals. It felt like a balance even back then. Kara brought the chaos, and I made sure no one forgot to turn off the stove. That pattern stuck. Through middle school and high school, she was the wild card. Spontaneous, dramatic, always pushing against something. I was the grounded one, the planner. I drove us to school, helped her pass algebra, and sat with her after her parents' fights. In return, she gave me the sense that I mattered, that someone needed me, and at that age, that was enough. We ended up at different colleges, me on a scholarship to a state business program, her at a private liberal arts school on the East Coast. She lasted a year. I remember the phone call. It was late fall, my sophomore year. Her voice sounded small, almost brittle. "I hate it here," she said. "Can I come crash with you for a while?" Of course she could. I had a tiny 2-bedroom apartment off campus. I moved my desk into the living room and gave her the spare room. She promised it would be temporary. 6 months later, she was still there. She tried a few community college classes, picked up shifts at a coffee shop, then quit after a week because the manager looked at her weird. I helped rewrite her resume at least 3 times. She flaked on half the interviews she booked. I never said anything. I figured she was finding her way, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't like being the one she came to when things fell apart. It made me feel useful. Rent was always a point of tension. She paid on time for the first 2 months. After that, it got more sporadic. I covered for her twice, quietly dipping into my savings account. She cried both times, said she hated being a burden, promised she'd get it together. I believed her. Then came Adam. We met through my internship the summer before senior year. He was working in data analytics for one of the partner firms. Tall, calm, analytical. The kind of guy who actually listened when you spoke. We started talking over lunch one afternoon, then texting, then seeing each other on weekends. He wasn't flashy or intense, just steady. And after a string of forgettable first dates and one truly chaotic situationship, that steadiness felt like gold. Kara met him at our apartment. I had invited her to join us for dinner one night, half joking that she should see the guy I was apparently soft-launching. She showed up late, in a red dress that made me wonder if I'd underdressed in my own home. But she was her usual magnetic self, asking him questions about his job, teasing me for being so corporate. Adam laughed at her jokes. She laughed louder. I chalked it up to her usual need to be the center of gravity in any room. After he left that night, she made a face. "He's cute," she said, flopping onto the couch. "Bit buttoned up, though. You really into him?" I remember brushing it off. "Yeah, I think so." She gave a little shrug. "As long as he treats you right." That was Kara's way. Vague support that left plenty of room for maneuvering. I didn't think much of it. Our relationship progressed. I graduated. Got a full-time offer at the firm where I'd interned. Adam and I moved in together 6 months later. I kept in touch with Kara, though our dynamic had started to shift. She moved out of my apartment shortly after graduation, into a place with a new friend she'd met working a temp gig. Our calls became less frequent. When we did meet up, she talked more about her frustrations, bad bosses, toxic coworkers, a string of disappointing guys. I listened. That's what I'd always done. When she lost her job again, she called me crying. I wired her enough to cover her rent and groceries for the month. She promised she'd pay me back. She never did. I told myself it didn't matter. We had history. I wasn't keeping score. But I started to notice things I hadn't before, like how she rarely asked about my work unless there was a story that made her laugh, or how she rolled her eyes when I mentioned a promotion. Ugh, you're such a workaholic. There was a distance growing between us, one I didn't know how to bridge without making it worse. So I kept things light, surface level, easier that way. One night, Adam came home from a networking event. I was finishing up a report at the kitchen table. He mentioned Kara in passing. She was there, he said, unbuckling his watch. Didn't know she worked in marketing. She doesn't, I said without looking up. He paused. She said she's been consulting with one of the startup sponsors. We only talked for a minute. I nodded, not really processing it. Later that week, she texted. Caught up with Adam the other night. He's doing well. You guys still solid? I remember rereading that message 3 or 4 times. Still solid. As if we were a pair of shoes or an old couch. I replied with a simple, yes. She didn't respond. That summer, Adam and I hit a rough patch. Nothing dramatic. Just the usual friction of 2 careers moving fast in different directions. We talked about it. Made adjustments. Things got better. I didn't hear from Kara much during that time. Then one day, I saw a photo of the 2 of them on her Instagram. They were at some industry mixer. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. His smile was polite. I stared at the photo for a long time. But I didn't ask. I didn't accuse. I told myself there was no story unless I made one. That's what best friends do, right? They trust. Even when the signals shift. Even when they know, somewhere deep down, that something's already broken. The first time Kara made a comment about Adam, we were at brunch. She was stirring sugar into her iced coffee with the kind of intensity usually reserved for major decisions. He's cute, she said, almost as if she were conceding something. But kind of stiff, don't you think? I looked up from my eggs. Stiff? She shrugged. I mean, he's not really your type, is he? You usually go for guys with more edge. I didn't respond right away. Adam wasn't flashy, no. He read The Economist unironically, meal prepped on Sundays, and made spreadsheets for everything from travel plans to monthly budgets. But he was kind. Steady. I didn't need edge. I had Kara for that. Still, the way she said it stayed with me. Like she knew something I didn't, or had already decided something I hadn't. It wasn't the only comment. There were others, casually dropped like they meant nothing. Does he even know how to have fun? Or, you two have that roommate vibe lately. She smiled when she said it, but it didn't feel like a joke. She started flaking on plans more often. We had a standing Thursday coffee catch-up before work. Her idea originally, but she canceled 3 weeks in a row. Said she was slammed with freelance work. Then I'd open Instagram and see her at rooftop bars with people I didn't recognize, captioned with inside jokes I wasn't part of. I told myself she was just busy. That people grow, friend circles shift. We weren't 21 anymore, holed up in my apartment eating ramen and watching crime documentaries. We had adult lives. Except she still called when things went wrong. Still vented to me about clients who ghosted her after promising big projects. About landlords who refused to fix the heat. About guys who bailed after 2 decent dates. I stayed on the phone with her past midnight on more than one occasion, even when I had early meetings. She always ended those calls with something like, "Ugh, you're the only one who gets it." And for a few minutes, it felt like the old days again. But then she'd disappear. No reply to texts. radio silence for days. When I finally called her out on it, gently, not even accusing, she laughed. "You're so sensitive lately," she said. "Is it the work stress or just you being your usual type A self?" That one stung more than I expected. At work, things were ramping up. I'd been given a small team to manage for a product rollout and was putting in long hours trying to make a good impression on upper leadership. I barely had time to think about the shift in our friendship, let alone dwell on it, but it was there, quietly growing. Adam noticed I was distracted, but he didn't press. He was busy too, long days at the firm, networking events 2 or 3 nights a week. We still had dinners together when we could, but there were more evenings spent in separate rooms, half communicating through open doors and background noise. One night I came home late, later than I'd planned. The office elevator had stalled, and I'd stayed behind to fix a budget spreadsheet my analyst had botched. When I walked in, Kara was in the kitchen. Adam was pouring wine. They were laughing at something. I stood in the doorway for a second, longer than I probably should have. She was perched on the counter, legs swinging, wine glass in hand. He was leaning against the sink, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen him in weeks. Her hand reached out mid-laugh and grazed his arm, just for a second, but it lingered. They both turned when they saw me. Adam smiled. Kara raised her glass. "Welcome home," she said, like it was her apartment too. I dropped my bag at the door and went straight to the fridge. Didn't know we were having company. "Your text said you'd be late," Adam said. "Kara was in the neighborhood. Figured we'd catch up." "Hope that's okay," Kara added, as if it made a difference. I said it was fine, made myself a quick salad I didn't want, and sat through another 20 minutes of their banter before she finally left. After the door shut behind her, I asked Adam how long she'd been there. "An hour? Maybe a bit more." She was telling me about some new campaign pitch she's working on. Honestly, I don't think she was even sure what she wanted to say, just needed to talk. I nodded. "She seems off lately," he added. "You noticed that?" I did, but I wasn't sure what he meant by off, and I didn't want to press either. "Maybe," I said. "She's always been a little all over the place." He didn't respond. We went to bed quietly that night, both of us scrolling through our phones instead of talking. A week later, she canceled on me again. Lunch this time. "Running behind on edits," her message read. That afternoon, I bumped into her at a cafe downtown. She was sitting with someone I vaguely recognized from her Instagram stories. They were laughing. She didn't see me. I didn't wave. There were other signs, subtle but accumulating. She posted a video tour of her new apartment, never once mentioning that I'd co-signed the lease. She started referring to mutual memories as, "the year I helped you through that work breakup," like she'd been the stabilizer in our friendship. I let it slide. Let it all slide, really. Because that's what I'd always done. I assumed, maybe foolishly, that even if things shifted, even if life got in the way, our foundation would hold. Years of friendship, of shared struggles and secrets, of showing up. Surely that meant something. But something was shifting between all of us. Adam grew quieter, more distracted. We'd be mid-conversation and I'd lose him to his phone or his inbox or a thought he didn't bother sharing. One night, I came home and found a receipt on the counter from a lunch spot near Kara's office. I didn't ask about it. It could have been coincidence. Or nothing. But it left me unsettled. The old version of me would have confronted it, gently but directly. The version that still believed in complete transparency. This version? She was tired. Too many hours at work. Too much effort keeping all the pieces together. So I let the doubts sit quietly, unchallenged. Trust was easier, even when it wasn't earned. Even when the air between the three of us felt like it was thick with something unspoken. And still, I told myself it was fine. Because if it wasn't, then the alternative was much harder to admit. The restaurant wasn't fancy. It was one of those exposed brick, bottomless mimosa places where you didn't have to dress up, but people did anyway. Jamie's birthday brunch. I hadn't seen her in months, and I almost bailed that morning because of a last-minute work fire drill. But I'd promised I'd come, and lately, I'd been breaking too many personal plans for work. So I showed up, 10 minutes late, hair still damp from the shower, with a gift bag I'd grabbed in a rush from the drugstore across the street. I walked in expecting small talk, 2 sweet Prosecco, and maybe a few familiar faces from college. I didn't expect Kara, and I definitely didn't expect Adam. They were seated at the far end of the table, nestled into a corner booth like they belonged there. Her hand was on top of his. Their heads tilted slightly toward each other. He was laughing at something. Not politely, genuinely. I stopped walking. Kara saw me first. Her expression flickered. Not shock, not guilt, just brief awareness. Then she sat up straighter, pulling her hand back as if she just remembered she was being watched. Adam turned, his face went slack. Not remorseful. Just blank. No one at the table said anything, and I don't think I breathed. My feet carried me the rest of the way, like I was on autopilot. I slid into an open seat near the middle of the table, heart hammering in a way I hadn't felt since high school speech competitions. Jamie smiled, clearly unaware. Glad you made it. We were just about to order mimosas, okay? I nodded because it was easier than speaking. I didn't look at them. Not directly. But I could feel Kara watching me. After a few minutes, she stood and walked around the table like she needed to stretch or make a show of grabbing something from her bag. She stopped beside me, leaned down slightly, and whispered, "We didn't mean for it to happen." That's what she said. No apology, no explanation. Just that. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My ears were ringing. I was vaguely aware of someone pouring drinks, someone else asking if the shakshuka was good last time. But all I could focus on was the space where Kara had stood, where Adam still sat, where the pieces I thought were stable were clearly not. I don't remember getting up. I must have mumbled something about a call or a work emergency. No one followed me. Not even Jamie, who I'm sure noticed that something was off, but maybe didn't know what to do about it. I got in my car and sat for 10 minutes before turning the engine on. Just breathing. Trying not to. I wish I could say that was the moment I stopped caring. That I slammed a door and moved on. But the truth is messier. I replayed that morning 100 times in my head. Like a movie I couldn't turn off. Her hand on his. The casual way she said it. His silence. He didn't even look surprised to see me. I waited a week for some kind of message. A call, an explanation, something. Nothing came. I didn't reach out either. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't cost more of myself than they were worth. 2 months passed. Work consumed me in the best and worst ways. I took on more projects than I should have. Stayed late. Volunteered for things no one wanted. My performance reviews were glowing. My inbox was always full. I liked the structure of it. It made sense. Effort in. Results out. No games. No blurred lines. It was a Saturday afternoon when I found out. I was standing in line at the grocery store, scrolling through my phone, trying to find a decent recipe that wouldn't require a third trip down the dairy aisle. That's when I saw it. Kara's Facebook post. A picture of her hand, resting on Adam's chest. Gold engagement ring gleaming under soft lighting. His face partly cropped but unmistakable. The caption read, "Didn't see it coming, but sometimes the best love stories write themselves. Swayed, engaged, blessed, finally." I stared at it long enough for the guy behind me to ask if I was in line or not. She didn't even bother blocking me. No warning, no reach out beforehand. Just a post. Public. Like we'd never been anything. Like she hadn't cried on my floor a dozen times. Slept in my spare room for free. Worn my clothes. Stolen my boyfriend. I didn't cry. I wish I had, but I didn't. I put my phone away, bought a frozen pizza and a bottle of wine, and went home. I turned my notifications off. I deleted the app. The next morning, I opened my laptop, made a list of every professional goal I'd been putting off. and started applying for internal roles I'd convinced myself I wasn't ready for. I stopped going to the places they might show up. I stopped answering questions from mutual friends who wanted to stay neutral or not get involved. They'd made their choice, and I was done pretending it didn't matter. But it did. It still does sometimes. Not because I wanted Adam back, not because I missed Kara, but because I'd trusted both of them, and they'd looked me in the face and chosen themselves. Together. Like I was just a footnote in a story that had already been written without me. So no, I didn't send a message, didn't like the post, didn't rage comment or subtweet or call her crying at 2 a.m. I just disappeared from the version of their lives they had clearly rewritten. Let them have it. They could play the leads in whatever story they needed to tell. I knew the truth. And eventually, everyone else would too. I didn't implode exactly. I just unraveled in slow, silent increments that were easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. First, I moved, quietly ended the lease, packed my things on a rainy weekend, and left behind the apartment that still held the imprint of both of them. It was too small anyway. Too many memories crammed into one bedroom and a kitchen that still smelled like the garlic shrimp Adam used to make when he felt like showing off. I didn't tell anyone the new address. Not friends, not coworkers, not Kara. Especially not Kara. I blocked them both. Phone, social, everything. I didn't want to know how long it took them to move in together, what their registry looked like, or which mutual friend was going to pretend they didn't realize it might be awkward and tag me in a photo. I didn't want to see their story play out like a curated highlight reel while I was still trying to sleep through the night without clenching my jaw. At work, I went quiet. Not lazy, never that, but automatic. I buried myself in tasks and kept my head down. When someone cracked a joke in a team meeting, I smiled a beat too late. When lunch invites came, I declined. Said I had calls, or deadlines, or something to finish that couldn't wait. None of it was a lie. I just stopped pretending I had the energy to socialize. It was my manager, Claire, who noticed. She pulled me aside after a strategy sync one afternoon and said, "You've been efficient lately, more than usual." I couldn't tell if that was a compliment or a warning. She paused. I mean that as a good thing, but I also know the look of someone trying to outrun something. I didn't say anything, just nodded and pretended to check my watch. Later that week, she forwarded me an internal memo, an experimental initiative around department restructuring and workflow efficiency. She asked if I'd want to take it on. Low visibility, she said, but high impact, and the kind of problem solving you're good at. I didn't hesitate. I said yes. That side project changed everything. It was the first time I'd been given something that wasn't about proving my ability to follow instructions, but about shaping outcomes. There were no roadmaps, no templates, just messy spreadsheets, departmental reports, and vague executive goals about optimization. So I started digging. I interviewed managers, shadowed coordinators, and rebuilt a bloated task pipeline that had been wasting company hours for years. I condensed multi-step sing-offs into 2-click systems. I taught myself how to write clear documentation and built a team wiki from scratch. I rewrote internal guides so they actually made sense, and I flagged redundancies no one else had bothered to challenge. A month in, Claire looped in one of the directors. A few weeks after that, someone from the C-suite stopped by my desk and said, "I hear you're fixing the operational leak no one else wanted to touch." I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled and said, "Trying." And I was. Trying to find something, anything, that made me feel like I wasn't just the girl who got replaced. That I could be more than someone's ex-best friend or ex-girlfriend. That I had weight somewhere, even if it wasn't in anyone's Instagram captions. Every win at work was quiet, but it was mine. A new dashboard here, a more efficient workflow there. My name started showing up in CC lines on emails I never used to see. I was asked to join calls I used to be left off of. It felt good. Not joyful, not redemptive, but stabilizing. I didn't chase closure. I never sent a dramatic text or asked for answers. I didn't want apologies from people who could look me in the eye one day and post engagement photos the next. What would they even say? I didn't mean to hurt you. She had stood in my kitchen and touched his arm like it belonged to her. She had seen me at that brunch and said, "We didn't mean for it to happen," like it was a car accident and not a choice. He had looked at me, knowing exactly what I was walking into, and said nothing. I didn't need closure from that. But I also couldn't forget it. There's a specific kind of pain in being discarded by people you once considered extensions of yourself. Kara and I used to share clothes, inside jokes, entire years of our lives. She knew my passwords, my coffee order, the worst things my mother had ever said to me, and she still chose to walk away like I was a page she could rip out and toss. That stuck with me. It made me question more than just them. It made me look at all my relationships a little sideways, wondering how many were based on habit instead of respect. How many people kept me in their lives out of convenience? How many would stick around if loyalty wasn't expected? It sounds dramatic when I say it out loud, but when someone you trust burns you, the smoke doesn't clear all at once. You carry it with you. And I did. But I also carried something else. There was a moment, a very specific one, when I sat in a conference room, presenting a revised project pipeline to a VP who didn't know my name 6 months earlier, and I realized I was building something. Not just reports or dashboards, but credibility, autonomy, presence. They'd taken something from me, but not everything. And somewhere between the pain and the late nights and the blocked numbers, I decided I would never be in that position again. Not just romantically, professionally, personally, any of it. I didn't want to be the girl in the background anymore. The assistant, the support beam, the one people leaned on until they didn't need her. I wanted to be the structure. So I started aiming higher, quietly, carefully. I sat in meetings and listened not just for my part, but for what the leaders were really trying to accomplish. I asked questions most people skipped. I read annual reports in my free time. I learned who held influence, who stalled decisions, who got promoted and why. The work didn't fill the hole, but it made the ground under me more solid. And in the absence of closure, I built momentum. They could have each other. They already did. What I wanted now was leverage, position, enough power to never be dependent on anyone's invitation again. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was the start of something. There wasn't a single moment when everything changed. No grand announcement, no spotlighted triumph. It happened the way most real things do, gradually, with too much work and not enough sleep. I leaned in, stayed late, said yes to everything no one else wanted to touch. After that side project, word got around. I wasn't loud about it. I didn't post on LinkedIn or make a speech, but directors started looping me in. When one of them left, they asked if I could cover his team temporarily. I did. Then they didn't replace him. They just let me stay. By the end of that year, I was managing 2 departments. By the end of the next 4, there were politics, of course. Internal friction. People who thought I was moving too fast, who saw my quiet ambition as threat instead of merit. But I stayed professional, consistent, unshakable. I documented everything. I gave credit when it was due, and I never let anyone see me sweat. The CEO at the time was nearing retirement. She'd been in the role over a decade and built a respectable legacy, but the company had plateaued. We were stable, safe, and slowly slipping behind competitors who were taking bigger risks. When she stepped down, the board announced a national search. They wanted transformative leadership, whatever that meant. A wave of outside candidates came in, some flashy, some seasoned, all with resumes that belonged in glossy binders. I wasn't on anyone's shortlist, not at first. But I understood the company better than any outsider. I'd been part of the growth. I'd built systems from the inside, patched holes no one else even saw. And I had a strategy, something bold, data-backed, and quietly radical. So I made a deck. No consultants, no flair, Just a well-researched, practical turnaround plan with scalable initiatives and realistic benchmarks. I presented it to the board in a closed-door session. They asked hard questions. I answered them. 2 weeks later, they offered me the position. I didn't celebrate. Not publicly. No long-winded announcement. I changed my title in the company directory and got to work. A new office, a different parking spot, and a heavier kind of silence when I entered a room. There were changes to make. Real ones. I reorganized top leadership, rebuilt failing pipelines, cut dead projects, promoted people who had been overlooked. Some resented it, most respected it. A few resisted hard, but they didn't last. 6 months into the role, we hosted our annual winter gala. It wasn't my idea. The events team had already booked the venue before the CEO change. Big hotel, black tie, 100+ guests including partners, board members, key clients. I kept it on the calendar because I understood the optics. Visibility matters, even when you don't care for the spotlight. Invitations went out in batches. I approved the master list without much thought. It had been a brutal quarter, and my attention was on budget revisions and year-end reports. I didn't cross-check the guest list line by line. The night of the gala, I wore a navy silk dress and a pair of heels I'd only ever worn to weddings. My assistant had handled the logistics. I showed up just before the reception began, shook hands, smiled through photographs, made polite conversation with people I didn't recognize but who clearly recognized me. I wasn't prepared for the moment I saw them. It was near the bar. I was scanning the crowd when my eyes landed on her first, Cara. Her hair was shorter, curled into a style that looked expensive. She was wearing a champagne-colored dress and holding a glass of wine. Adam stood next to her, slightly behind. Still clean-cut, still slightly uncomfortable in crowds. For a second, I thought she might pretend not to see me. But that was never her style. She walked right up. I felt the weight of her gaze before she spoke. She smiled, tilted her head like she was greeting someone she'd bumped into at a reunion. "Still just an assistant?" she asked, her voice low and vaguely amused. I don't know what reaction she expected. Maybe a flinch, maybe a laugh, maybe a reminder of who she used to be to me. I smiled. "Good to see you." And I walked past her, right to the stage. The MC was wrapping up the opening remarks. I took the mic with practiced ease, thanked the audience, and welcomed them as the company's new CEO. There was a brief pause, an audible inhale from the crowd, followed by applause. I didn't look at Kara when I spoke, didn't search for Adam's face. I focused on the room, on the people who mattered, on the leadership team sitting front and center, and the board members lined up along the first row of tables. Afterward, I mingled briefly, took photos, answered questions about the coming year. Kara didn't approach me again. Neither did Adam. I watched them from a distance, their energy suddenly quieter, more cautious. They left before dessert. The next morning, I found an email in my work inbox. From Adam. Subject: "Congratulations." It was short, 3 sentences. Professional, bland, and careful. He said he was impressed by the progress I'd made and wished me continued success. He signed it with his full name, like we'd never lived together, like I hadn't once memorized the shape of his handwriting. I deleted it without responding. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need her regret. I had exactly what I came for, my own version of peace, built not on their recognition, but in spite of it. Because the truth was, I had never been just anything. And now, they knew it. The photo from that night ended up in our quarterly newsletter. I didn't ask for it to be featured. It was just part of the recap, tucked between event highlights and performance milestones. But there I was, standing on stage in that navy dress, the company logo glowing behind me, one hand lightly on the mic. The caption underneath read, "CEO Remarks, Winter Gala." It circulated through inboxes the following Monday. I noticed people in the break room glancing up from their screens when I walked in. like the image had reminded them of something they hadn't quite put together until then. I didn't mention Kara or Adam, not to anyone, but the silence that followed spoke volumes. They kept their distance for the rest of the gala after my announcement. I saw them across the room once, mid-conversation with a junior associate who clearly didn't know the full backstory. Kara's smile was tight, her posture straighter than usual. Adam stood behind her, his hand in his pocket, nodding as if he'd rather be anywhere else. They left before the closing toast. I watched their backs retreat toward the ballroom exit, while I shook hands with a regional VP. A week later, Adam emailed. The subject line read, "Meeting request." It was short, barely 4 sentences. He mentioned a new project his firm was developing and asked to connect for a quick conversation. "Would love your perspective on some joint initiatives," he wrote, like we were colleagues with a shared history of spreadsheets and quarterly targets. What he didn't say was that his firm depended on ours for nearly a third of their revenue, or that his name had been quietly removed from 3 recent proposal decks. I forwarded the email to HR. "Please redirect this to the appropriate department," I wrote. No explanation, no commentary, just procedure. A few hours later, I received a short confirmation from HR that the matter had been reassigned to procurement. Adam never emailed again. Kara didn't reach out at all. But the quiet began to shift. Mutual acquaintances started dropping hints in subtle ways. At networking events, in hallway, small talk. "Hey, didn't you used to be close with Kara?" Someone asked after a panel, their tone cautious, testing. "We ran in the same circles," I replied. "Oh, yeah, just... she's kind of been off the radar lately. Heard things have been tense." Tense was putting it lightly. Someone else, an old college friend who worked in PR, mentioned in passing that Kara had recently pulled out of a freelance contract mid-cycle. "Family stuff, apparently," she said. Or maybe just burnout, hard to say. By then, Adam had begun showing up in my periphery again. Not in person, but in ways that suggested a scramble. His name appeared on a request for proposal document our team received from an unfamiliar domain, clearly freelance. Someone flagged it during internal review and asked if I had a preference. "Standard process," I said. "No exceptions." We didn't select his bid. I never confirmed whether he and Kara had separated, but enough signs pointed in that direction. Her social media presence went quiet. The ring she used to show off in every 4th photo disappeared. A friend of a friend told me she'd moved into a studio downtown and was figuring things out. I didn't react. Not out loud. Because it wasn't satisfaction I felt. It wasn't revenge either. It was something colder, steadier. A kind of settled clarity. They'd made their choices. Together. They'd stitched their lives from borrowed threads, pretending the seams wouldn't show. And now, the unraveling was happening without my help. I didn't need to interfere. I just kept moving forward. The company's performance metrics were stronger than they'd been in 5 years. Our leadership team had stabilized. I'd hired 2 women into executive roles who'd previously been passed over, and I made sure our maternity leave policy finally aligned with what we claimed to value. I wasn't interested in performative wins. I wanted the foundation rebuilt, stronger, smarter, more resilient. Sometimes after long days, I'd sit alone in my office for an extra 15 minutes before going home. The city lights stretched out past the windows. The hum of the building shifted to a quieter frequency. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like ownership. The kind that isn't handed to you. The kind you build from the ground up, brick by brick, with no shortcuts and no safety net. There were moments, small, sharp ones, when the past brushed against me. A comment, a question, a name mentioned too casually. But I didn't flinch. Not anymore. Because I hadn't just survived what they did, I'd transformed because of it. And every step forward was proof. It had been just over a year since the gala. Long enough for the heat of it to fade, but not so long that I'd forgotten the details. Kara hadn't surfaced publicly in months, and Adam, if he was still around, had done a good job staying invisible. I didn't think about them often, not intentionally, but every now and then, their names would flash in a calendar invite or show up in a CC field from an old thread, and the air would tighten slightly. Then it would pass. Just another memory I didn't have to carry anymore. The message came on a Tuesday. I was between meetings, half scrolling through notifications when I saw it. A LinkedIn message from Kara. No subject line. Just, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for longer than I should have. The profile photo was new, professionally taken, clearly edited, overly bright, but her eyes were the same. I hovered over the message without clicking it. Let it sit unread. I didn't answer. 3 days later, she sent a second one. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't understand what I was doing." I read it 3 times, then a fourth. There was nothing else, no excuses, no dramatic backstory, no fishing for pity, just those 2 sentences. Clean, simple. I sat with it for the rest of the day. Didn't mention it to anyone. I wasn't angry anymore, but I didn't trust her either. I didn't know what she wanted. Whether it was closure, absolution, or just relief from her own guilt. But I also knew it wasn't about her. Not anymore. So I replied, "If you want to meet for coffee, I have half an hour free Friday morning. 9:30. Union, Pine. Let me know." She responded within minutes. "I'll be there. Thank you." That Friday was overcast. The kind of weather that always made the city feel quieter. I arrived a few minutes early, ordered black coffee, and found a seat near the window. I didn't bring my laptop. Didn't check my phone. I just waited. She walked in right on time. She looked older. Not aged, just changed. The way people do after a long season of pretending they're fine. Her posture was still confident, but her energy was subdued. She wore minimal makeup. Neutral colors. No flashy jewelry. She spotted me and approached slowly, like she was bracing for impact. "Hi," she said. I nodded toward the seat across from me. "Go ahead." She sat down, folded her hands in front of her. Didn't order anything. There was a long pause. "I know I don't deserve your time," she said, "but I wanted to say it to your face. I was wrong." I didn't interrupt. "I knew what I was doing when it started with him," she continued. "I just told myself lies to make it feel okay. That you two weren't serious. That we drifted. That maybe you wouldn't even care." I sipped my coffee. It was still too hot. "I didn't expect it to last," she said, almost laughing. "With him, I mean. I think I just wanted to win. Or maybe prove something. I don't even know what anymore." I stayed quiet. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were short, unpolished. A small detail, but I noticed. Kara used to spend hours getting them done. Little things change when people stop performing. "I lost a lot after that," she said. "Not just you, a lot of people stopped trusting me. Clients, friends. My brother doesn't return my calls, and I don't blame them." I could feel her waiting. For a response, for softness, for a hint that this might lead somewhere better. "You hurt me," I said. "Both of you did." She nodded quickly. "I know. You didn't just cross a line, you erased it. You looked me in the face and walked away like none of it mattered, like our history was disposable." She blinked fast. Her eyes started to gloss, but she didn't let the tears fall yet. "I'm not saying this to punish you," I said. "But you need to understand why we're not going back to anything. There is no version of our friendship that exists after that kind of break." She nodded again, slowly this time. And then she cried. Quietly, no sobs, just tears sliding down her cheeks that she didn't bother to wipe. I let her. When she finally looked back up, her voice was smaller. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I believed her. But I also didn't care, not in the way I once would have. It didn't bring me peace to see her cry. It didn't satisfy anything in me. It just felt like something overdue, I wish you peace, I said. I hope you figure things out. But we're not going to be friends again. That part of my life is closed. She nodded. I get it. There was nothing else to say. I stood up, pulled my coat over my arm, and pushed in my chair. Take care, Kara. She didn't try to follow me. Outside, the wind had picked up. I walked back to the office without checking my phone, without replaying the conversation in my head. There was no analysis to be done, no alternate version to wish for. It was just done. People always think boundaries are about walls. Cold, punishing, final. They're not. They're about clarity. And mine was simple. Forgiveness didn't mean reopening the door. It meant locking it and walking away without bitterness. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. I was just clear. She didn't owe me anything more, and I didn't owe her access to the version of myself she had taken for granted. Some endings don't come with explosions. Some just end, with a conversation, a pause, and a final quiet goodbye. It's been 3 years. Sometimes that number surprises me. Not because it feels recent, quite the opposite. It feels like another lifetime. Another version of myself. One that was still shaped by proximity to people who didn't know how to value what I gave. The company's doing well, better than projections, better than what the board had hoped when they chose me. Our restructuring became the case study other firms started referencing. The strategy I pitched quietly in a boardroom now lives on slides presented at investor meetings. And my name, once left off of emails and overlooked in group settings, is at the center of most big decisions now. Not out of ego, just function. I lead a team I trust. That's probably what matters most. No one here is trying to take credit for what they didn't build. No one's smiling to your face while rewriting your story behind your back. We disagree, sometimes forcefully, but it's honest. That's all I've ever really needed. Clarity, consistency, and people who don't mistake kindness for weakness. My personal life is quieter than it used to be. I'm not married. I'm not chasing that version of happiness anymore. Not the timeline, not the optics, not the illusion that being chosen is the same as being valued. I date. I spend time with people who ask thoughtful questions and don't flinch when I take up space. But I'm content on my own. Fully. That used to sound like a consolation prize. Now it sounds like peace. I heard Kara and Adam divorced last year. No one told me directly, but word travels. Someone mentioned it in passing at an industry panel, as if it were a footnote. No drama, just a quiet split and a change of address. She moved to another state, somewhere smaller, less expensive. She teaches workshops now, I think. Creative branding or something close to it. I didn't look it up. I don't follow her life. I don't need to. I know who she is. And more importantly, I know who I am now. For a long time, I thought I needed revenge. Or at least a moment. Something definitive that would say, I won. But it never came. And eventually, I realized that was the wrong finish line. What I needed wasn't to beat them. It was to see them clearly. To understand that the people I trusted, who I thought knew me best, were only ever looking out for themselves. And once I accepted that, it stopped hurting. It's not that I've forgotten what happened. You don't forget that kind of betrayal, but it lost its sharpness. It's just a fact now. A data point in a much larger pattern that taught me to be more careful with where I place my loyalty. Power doesn't always come from position. I've had titles before. I've sat in rooms where I didn't speak because I thought it was smarter to be likable than right. That version of me worked twice as hard for half the credit. Now I speak. Not to be heard, but because I have something to say. I've learned that real power is quieter than people think. It's not shouting or posturing. It's knowing when to walk away from what no longer serves you. It's refusing to shrink just because someone else feels small beside you. It's choosing self-respect over proximity. Every time. I used to give away pieces of myself, time, energy, opportunities, to people who only saw what I could do for them. Now I invest those things where they have room to grow. That's the legacy I care about. Not being remembered by people who betrayed me, but being respected by the ones who never had to ask me twice for integrity. The ones who show up, who tell the truth even when it's hard, who don't mistake closeness for entitlement. Every decision I make now, professionally, personally, is rooted in that clarity. It's the filter everything passes through. Is this aligned? Is this honest? Is this mine? I no longer wait for apologies that won't come. I no longer need to prove that I was the better friend, the more faithful partner, the one who stayed when it would have been easier to walk. That story's done. The lessons learned. And the version of me that came out of it, she's stronger, yes. But more than that, she's calm. She knows her worth. And she never, ever begs for recognition from people who failed to see her the first time. So when people ask me how I got here, I tell them the truth. I worked. I waited. I listened. I adjusted. And when the time came, I didn't fight for a seat at someone else's table. I built my own. And I sit at the head of it. Every day. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment. I read every one. And if you've ever had to walk away from someone you once trusted, know this. You're not weak for letting go. You're strong for choosing yourself. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is rising quietly.